Hello there. In today's video, I'll review a romance thriller film. My Teacher, My Obsession was released in 2018. Let's get this party started. Riley and her father, Chris, arrived at the new high school where Riley had transferred. Chris asks his daughter if she has already decided on a club to join. But when she says no, he asks her to please do her best to make things easier for him because he has decided to rebuild his life and needs her help. She agrees subtly and ironically and asks her father to leave her alone for the first few days of school because she does not want to be known as the professor's daughter. Meanwhile, a teen girl walks the school halls photographing her classmates. Curiously, when she sees Chris Riley's father, she only takes pictures of men. Trisha, one of the school's mean girls, interrupts the girls' concentration as she takes several pictures of them. Trisha asks Kyla to photograph her with her friends and then mocks her hand, meaning down close, making Kyla uncomfortable. Trisha notices Kyla focusing her camera on Riley's father after she takes the picture. So she tells him that the handsome man is the new literature teacher, and she's had her eye on him for a while. Later, Chris enthusiastically teaches his class until he notices some disinterest in his students, particularly Trisha, who continues to use her cell phone instead of paying attention. As a result, Chris approaches Trisha and takes her phone. Trisha tries to deceive her teacher by claiming she was only checking an urgent message from her family. But he makes the entire class laugh by reading Trisha's social media comment. Then he requests that she and the other students show him some songs from their playlist. As a result, the youngsters begin naming current mainstream artists such as Bruno Mars, Taylor Swift, and Ed Sheeran. Chris is taken aback when Kyla shows him the Beatles on her cell phone, but he quickly makes light of the situation by telling her that the Beatles stole musical ideas from African-American artists. Kyla responds angrily to this remark. Finally, Chris expresses to his students that he does not want to be perceived as just another teacher, but rather that they can trust him and feel free to express themselves. Kyla looks at him like a teen, at the love of her life, while Trisha uses the opportunity to lightly insinuate herself. Chris says goodbye to all of his students at the end of class. However, Kyla misinterprets Chris's greeting to his daughter and leaves the room dazed. Later, Kyla and Riley meet in the computer lab and start talking shyly because they have some interests in common. Tyler photographs Riley and requests her last name in order to include the photograph in the yearbook. And observing Riley's nervous response, Riley is the daughter of Mr. Sumner, the new literature teacher, Kyla discovers. Riley begs her to keep the secret, and Kyla agrees, but takes advantage of the situation to seek assistance with the subject. Riley agrees and laughs. When Chris gets home, he asks Riley about her first day of school and is overjoyed to learn that Riley befriended Kyla on her first day. When Kyla returns home, she finds her mother working out and notices how cheerful she is. As a result, she suspects she's going on a date. When she notices a new dress hanging on the door, her suspicions are confirmed. As a result, she begins asking her mother for details as if they were two teenagers. The woman only tells her that the two met late at night at the market. Kyla fantasizes about her teacher before going to bed until she hears her mother knock on her door. Riley welcomes Kyla into his home the next day, and the two become even closer. Riley opens her heart by telling Kyla that her parents separated due to her mother's infidelities as Kyla begins to ask her questions about her father. Kyla, in turn, reveals that her father abandoned her when she was a child. Then Kyla takes advantage of Riley, going to the bathroom for a few minutes before going up to Chris's room to fantasize in his bed. Trisha uses a pencil as an excuse the next day to flirt very suggestively with Chris, but he responds very cleverly, keeping Trisha in check until lunchtime. Trisha approaches Riley and informs her that she knows her father's secret, so she attempts to befriend her by inviting her out shopping before saying goodbye. Trisha warns her not to spend too much time with Kyla because she is a maniac. Seconds later, Kyla appears and confronts Riley, telling him that she overheard his conversation with Trisha. She then tries to hide her irritation by convincing Riley that Trisha only wants to be close to her because she is obsessed with her father. She also tells him about a history teacher who was fired for having an affair with Trisha. Later, Kyla calls Riley to plan Riley's birthday party and apologize for her behavior at school, telling her that it was only to keep her and her father safe from Trisha. Riley responds that she has nothing to be concerned about because her father would never do something like that. Furthermore, as he explains that he is starting a relationship with someone he met at the market, Kyla notices her mother getting ready to leave as the doorbell rings and she freaks out about going to open the door. Unfortunately, she encounters Chris on the other side, confirming her theory. Kyle, Jess. His mother is surprised to learn that her partner and her daughter are acquainted. Chris then explains that Kyla is in his class. Kyla accepts the flower bouquet. Chris gave it to her mother and is getting ready to put it in a vase. But she is so jealous of Chris's happiness with her mother that she stages an accident with them to ruin their date. As a result, the date takes place at home, and Kyla will not leave them alone even during dinner. However, their date is becoming increasingly romantic. Kyla storms upstairs to her room, where she plots her next move. while Chris and Jess were heating up the living room. They hear Kyla screaming and she runs downstairs to tell them that someone was spying on her and that she should calm down. Kyla requests that she be allowed to join them in the living room. As a result, they all spend the night there. Kyla is taken aback when she and Chris accidentally bump into each other in the bathroom the next day. Chris offers to drive Kyla to school at breakfast since they both go to the same school. Chris apologizes for the inconvenience of the morning, but Kyla begins to make a very subtle innuendo, until Riley arrives and breaks the tension. Later, the two meet in the dark room, where Kyla reveals the photograph she took with her camera. The conversation is tense because Kyla is angry that Riley went out with Trisha. Tyler defends herself by claiming that she is exaggerating the situation. She also reveals that Trisha informed her that the person who had a relationship with the fired history teacher was not her, but Kyla. Following that, Kyla confronts Trisha in her locker and threatens her later that evening. Kyla takes some provocative photos of herself. Riley goes to Kyla the next day to apologize, but Kyla ignores her as she opens her locker. When they discover a large number of pictures of Kyla inside the locker, she becomes enraged and runs to Chris for assistance. Days later, Kyla and Riley reconcile at the location where they first met. As Kyla tells Riley, she shields Chris from Trisha because he makes her mother happy. She also tells him that she took the photos to send to the history teacher who was fired, so she admits to having a relationship with him, but only because she had been psychologically abused. Later that night, Kyla and Jess prepare for dinner with Chris. Kyla, on the other hand, takes Chris's phone and shows him the messages he has received from Trisha. Jess begins arguing with Chris, mistreating him, and evicting him from the house. Kyla then takes advantage of the situation and goes to Chris's car to console him, but assuming a more dominant and insinuating posture, to the point of literally seducing him like an expert. Despite his protests, Chris simply observes Kyla exit the car and enter his home. She then triumphantly marches into his room and smashes his cell phone. She used to text Chris while pretending to be Trisha. The next day, a swarm of inspectors storms into the classroom, demanding that Chris let Trisha out for questioning. Kyla gets ready to go to Riley's birthday party in the evening. However, she takes advantage of her mother's situation to console her and confirm that she has ended her relationship with Chris. Also, Jess informs her that Trisha will be expelled from school because a broken phone containing Tyler's photos was discovered in her locker. When Kyla arrives at the party, she gives Riley her gift. She also leaves him a small bottle of whiskey. She immediately seizes the opportunity to sneak into Chris's room and seduce him. Chris gives in after a few seconds of making advances, and they both begin to turn up the heat. Riley walks in and discovers the scene just as they are about to carry it out. I stormed out of the room, furious and perplexed. Chris approaches her and asks her to speak calmly, but Riley leaves, so Chris throws everyone out of the party and returns to his room to get his car keys and leave. But seeing Chris prioritize his daughter, Kyla tries to seduce him once more. Kyla is enraged and is plotting a new strategy. Meanwhile, Riley writes to inform her of what has occurred. The following day, things are extremely tense in class, and things only get worse at the end when Jess enters and violently slaps Christ. Later, Chris receives numerous calls from Kyla, but does his best to ignore them. Riley appears and begins talking to him, feeling more empathy for him as she realizes the terrible situation her father has been going through for several months. Kyle has also realized his opportunism and coldness. Meanwhile, Kyla calls Trisha desperately because she needs her to carry out her Machiavellian plan. When she eventually manages to meet with her, it is only to provoke her. But when she fails, she begins to beat herself up and pretend to be violently attacked by Trisha in front of Chris's van, hoping that he will come to her aid. Trisha is arrested minutes later, and Kyla is taken to the hospital. She pretends to apologize to her mother for her behavior and says she will let Chris see her. Riley, on the other hand, appears. She unmasks Kyla and informs her that her sick plan has come to an end, but she agrees to do her one last favor, which is to cover a school sporting event that Kyla will be unable to attend due to her injury. Chris enters the room to say goodbye, but she immediately begins to demonstrate her obsession and insanity, putting Chris on high alert, who tells Kyla she needs professional psychiatric help in order to stop hurting everyone around her. He also tells her that he is quitting so that he will never have to see her again. Later, Chris returns to the school to retrieve his belongings and drop off his letter of resignation, while Riley photographs the event. However, in the middle of the night, Kyla switches off the lights and attacks Riley with a scalpel, injuring her in the stomach. She then seeks out Chris and begins to insinuate herself with a more dominant attitude, abusing Chris with the scalpel. Chris becomes enraged when Kyla mentions that Riley will no longer be a problem in the relationship, and he pushes Kyla away, but he is accidentally knocked out when he hits his head on the table. The school janitor overhears everything and rushes to help after being knocked down by Kyla's kick. But Kyla takes advantage of the situation to end her life and chase Riley around the school. Finally, the girls are left in the dark room hand in hand. And just when Riley thought it was all over, she fights back and knocks Kyla out. Police and ambulances arrive on the scene and take charge, transporting the girls to be treated for their injuries. After a while, Riley gets ready for her first day of college while her father gets ready for his first day at his new job. At the end, as Riley gets into the car to say goodbye to Chris, Kyla appears from behind, watching everything unfold. Thank you for taking the time to watch. To receive new movie recaps, please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon.